watch the world passing by. With you by my side, maybe this ride could make things right. Speeding up, blurring out the lights. Soon your eyes will be the only blue. Give me more minutes of this peace. We could go anywhere. This is our chance to forget. We could go nowhere. Give me more hours of this peace. We could go anywhere. This is our chance to escape. Let's go nowhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session webinar on behavioral design and nudging and how they can help us reach our goals at work. I'm so excited to see you all. My name is Pernille Hippebrun, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Session. And today we have a panel consisting of Charlotte Berg from Novo Nordisk. She will introduce herself in a minute, as well as Olivier Houllier, who is French and the co-founder and CEO of Inclusive Brains, and you will introduce yourself in a minute as well. So just to kick this off in a nice way, please say hi in the chat and tell us where you're dialing in from in the world, but also let us know what brought you to this webinar today. So what would you like to get out of it? Is there anything special that you have in mind? Then please let us know in the chat, and we'll see if we can try to answer some of the questions you might have. And also we will cover what is nudging and what is behavioral design. We'll come up with a few definitions, and then we'll let the panel also answer from their point of view and from their experience, what is behavioral design and nudging, and how can we actually use these terms to reach our goals at work. So basically that's what this session webinar is all about. And as you can probably hear, I'm a little bit what do you say? I have a bad throat today, but that's life. Sometimes it hits you with a curveball. This wasn't one of the major ones, but I was down with the flu for the past couple of days. But today I'm fresh and healthy again, so that's good. And but that's the explanation of my voice of today. So so happy to see you, and I'll take this banner out. And then actually what I would like to start out with is just the definition part. From theory, and then again, as I said, maybe Olivier and Charlotte have some other explanations or some other definitions that you might be able to use as well whenever you think about how can you apply behavioral design at work in your workplace and your work setting. But Thaler and Sunstein, their famous book called Nudged, defines it as any aspect of a choice architecture that alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding any options. So basically, it's not by law or anything that will hinder you in doing stuff. It's by nudging you or helping you to behave in a certain way, like putting up signs in traffic where you are guided in a gentle and maybe unconscious way to behave in a certain way. And also at work, and I know Charlotte has a lot of examples of how you have tried to use nudging to have people use more healthy behavior whenever it comes to health and safety in Novo Nordisk. So we are curious to hear more about that in a minute. And then what about behavioral design? How can you define that? And basically, this is where you, Olivier, you come into the picture as a neuroscientist, because there's a lot of psychology in this and behavioral psychology. It's a set of techniques and patterns you can use to change the way people behave. You can move people in a certain way if you know a little bit about psychology and neuroscience, which we know that you do, Olivier. So we're looking forward to hear a little bit about that in a minute. So basically, when you put these two things together, nudging and behavioral design, you find something that might inspire you in terms of how you can help move the elephant. So to those of you who knows of the book Switch, this is a book that talks a lot about how to create change at work and how to help the writer, which is the more rational side of our brain, see the long view and have you have that rational part of your brain help you to figure things out in the long run, but also try to steer the elephant, which is then the tricky part, because the elephant is our emotional part, and the one that kicks in and that can be harder to move and be harder to actually make go in the direction where you would want it to go. So how do we help the elephant move in the right direction? How do we positively influence or even maybe manipulate? And we're going to talk about a little bit about that word as well today. Um, People to behave in a way that would be good for them and also the organization. And then there's the path that's also talked about in the book Switch, where they talk about, well, you could also help people just shape the path in a way where they don't even have to think. They can just basically follow the path in a way or in a direction where it will lead to better results. So, with this short introduction, I would like to ask you, Charlotte, to introduce yourself in a minute. But first of all, I would really like to thank you for being here today, because I know it's your 1 year anniversary, wedding anniversary. So, congratulations, Charlotte. This is a big honor that you're spending your time with us today. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yes, and as you can see, I might not be that young, so being married for 1 year in this late age is something special, I think. So I'm happy with my life. Yes, but in work relations, I'm working in Novo Nordisk and have been working there for 7 years within health and safety. And I'm a project manager enrolling different health projects and also facilitating large-scale events. I've been curious about behavioral design for many years, taking a masterclass in behavioral design back in 2018. And I think what is that puts me in the curious corner is that it's so strange that we as a human have such a hard time doing what we ourselves think is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So why is it that even though we put our mind to something, that it does not happen all the time? I think what many of us is familiar with is the New Year's resolutions, right? On the 31st of December, we are all very motivated to change things, and maybe already 1st of January, when we wake up, the motivation has decreased a lot, I think. Mm-hmm. So, and also this happens in work life. There are so many expectations, and we have such a busy time. So even though we know what is right thing to do, it's sometimes difficult for us to actually manage to do what we ourselves or our colleagues thinks is the right thing to do. So this is what is I'm really curious to look into. How can we actually make it easier for the colleagues to do what we think is the right thing to do within health and safety?
Awesome. We're looking forward to hearing much more about that and your answers to some of those curious questions you might have asked yourself. Thank you, Charlotte, for that introduction. And Olivier, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me on this webinar. And hi, everyone. I'm Olivier. I'm from France, yet I'm talking to you guys from Amsterdam, Netherlands today. My background is in behavioral and brain sciences, and I insist on the behavioral part. It's not just neuroscience. As far as I'm concerned, I have a full disclaimer to you guys. I'm a scientist, and as a scientist, what I'm going to share with you is my opinion, which is not objective, because objectivity does not exist, which is not independent, because independence does not exist, and which is not unbiased, because unbiased does not exist. So, starting from there, and after this full disclosure, what I'm going to share with you is my very partial view of things based on experience on data collection and inferences and interpretation of data.
Yes.
And the idea nowadays, and this has been kind of an obsession for me throughout my entire life and academic and business career, is to try to better understand real people in real life environments, not just what some theoretical academic models, as fancy as they are, could predict, and generally, don't predict very well what is happening. One of the things I've been working my entire life on is understanding why we're so attracted to putting people in boxes. for example, this emotion versus rationality box is a fascinating one. Everyone is using it. Yet,
Yes.
if you look at how the brain works, there is no such thing as a rational or an emotional part of the brain. They interact, they're intertwined, they are
Yeah.
interdependent. And this is why it is so difficult sometimes to understand why we're doing things and how we're doing things, because this framework, emotion versus rationality, is what the brain is creating, but does not reflect how the brain works.
No, so the elephant and the rider metaphor
Yes,
actually is kind of
brain,
out of the order, or is it's our own way of trying to help
it is,
ourselves
it is.
understand how we can create
Charlotte
change.
said something that is key in
Mm.
when you work in behavioral insights, behavioral design, nudges. You call it the way you want. Is for things to work, if you want to change people's behavior, um, on paper, the easiest way is to make their lives easier. If you design something that is going to facilitate people's lives, to create the incentives that provides more of something to people, if they have an, their brains are going to tick. They're going to love it, consciously or not. And this is why my experience spans from being a professor at university, from working on these questions with the French government and other governments, actually at the same time as the British government created their Behavioral Insights Unit in 2010. We started in 2001 with the French government. But the big difference between the French government and the British government in their approach to behavioral insight and behavior change and applying nudges is, while in France we were writing reports to convince the government to allow us to run field experiments, the British were running the experiments to convince the government to have more credits to do things. And while we were just writing reports, they were already collecting data and actually implementing change.
All
Then
right.
into the private sector with the World Economic Forum, where I led health and healthcare, and I worked with Charlotte's company, Novo Nordisk, on many projects. And now I'm an entrepreneur in neurotechnology, meaning that I'm building machines that can sense people, that can better understand people, so that we can make more informed choices and more informed, scientifically or evidence-informed strategies to facilitate the lives of people, as you both very accurately mentioned.
Yeah. So Olivier, just to stay for a moment with the two the differences between the French and the English approach to to change.
Pragmatism. It's called pragmatism.
Yeah. So the thing you talk about, making it easy, but also going out there and starting applying some of the research to gather data and to basically get a foundation to speak from. What were your key insights from those two approaches, and what would you recommend people to do in a private setting or in an organization?
3 words: test, learn, adapt. Test again, learn again, readapt.
Yeah.
That's the approach.
Yes.
People will come. I love all the books that report on experiments that work, but there is this little thing called context dependence that
Yes.
makes every experience, every workplace, every social group, you name it, unique.
Yes.
And the thing is to come with a certain knowledge, but then to design, to adapt your strategy, your insights, your tactics to the group you have.
Yes.
And this is why the one learning sounds very, maybe not new to people, very obvious, but it is so hard sometimes to revisit what is obvious. There is no one size fits all intervention that works.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
you take the analogy of clothes, let's say that we're designing an intervention that will prevent accidents in a factory. This intervention, behavioral intervention, has to be tailored to the factory and to the workers exactly the same way the clothes have to be adapted to people. You're not going to give the same kind of clothes to someone whose height is 2 meters as compared to someone who's 1.7 meters.
Mm.
And that seems so obvious. You're like, yeah, of course we're not going to give big clothes to a small person and small clothes to a big person. Yeah, it's obvious, but if you do it for clothes, how come you're not doing it for interventions?
Yes. So
Why
that's
would there
so,
be this
yeah.
magic recipe that would work everywhere? It would be fantastic or super boring for people like us who study these things and work on them. But it's an illusion to think that because you're going to read a book and find a tactic or a behavioral intervention that you would love, that it
Mhm.
will work everywhere. This is not how
So,
science works. This is not how human work. This is just wishful thinking. And we don't live with Alice in the Wonderlands.
no,
Fortunately,
so
I'm
so we
control.
just lost all hope of learning a one size fits all tactic for using behavioral design and nudging at this webinar.
No,
So
but there
Charlotte,
is a method.
uh,
There is a method, just like for
exactly.
clothing, to build things in a way that you tailor them. But
Yes,
the
and
magic, I leave a magic to Las Vegas and to magicians. I'm a
that's
scientist who's
that's why,
applying science to real life.
yeah, it's interesting because I want to bring you into the picture now, Charlotte, because I know that you just mentioned also in your introduction that you loved some of the things that that you can learn from behavioral science and design in terms of understanding our irrational parts and why we don't necessarily do what's best for us. So can you tell us a little bit about what was one of the first studies or learnings that you got involved in Novo Nordisk that actually use some of those techniques or behavioral design principles? And maybe just to, can I show the favorite ones you shared with me that you really liked? And also maybe you can speak a little bit to them, because that's where Olivier will will take you on the word that there is a methodology and there are some principles you can be inspired by even within this. So some of your favorite was the path of least resistance, the default, the personal part, the reciprocity, and the moment of power and feedback. And I know this is just a really, really quick overview, but Charlotte, I'll let you speak to it so that you can tell us maybe a little bit about how did you use some of these principles in some of the experiments you're running in Novo Nordisk.
Yes, first of all, I'm sitting here with a big smile because I totally agree with Olivier that, this one size fits all does not exist. And
Right.
this is also, I think, the hard part when you want to introduce this into your organization, because it's not easy to actually help people getting this knowledge and then just do it on their own. They need the toolbox, they need the knowledge in order to actually themselves define what is working in this context and what will work in another context. So this is why I think it has been difficult. I have a wish that we give this knowledge to more colleagues in the organizations, but it's not that easy to do, because you have to actually consider each situation and each context and then design your behavioral design.
It's an investment. It's an investment financially for an organization, in time and human power. However, it's a good investment. Cost
Yes.
money, cost time, but it's a good investment because
Yes.
you learn some of the principles, you learn the methodology, and then you can be creative in adapting the methodology. If I may share one example that I've always loved, is the fact that some people in HR learn from some behavioral interventions in food. At some point, people were scratching their heads to help people, other individuals, lose weight or eat in a more diverse way. So what they did is compared people who were planning their meals on a day-to-day basis, meaning you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, what am I going to eat today for lunch? As opposed to people who would plan their meals ahead, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and put the meals down on a calendar so that they could see them. And the result was you have more chances to have a diverse diet over the month if you have a full visual picture of your meals, meaning that on your calendar, you see that 3 days in a row, you're going to eat a steak and fries, for example. You might be able to move things around and say, no, that's not good. However, if you just do it on a daily basis, you would have more chances to repeat the meals. So that's the learning from the, I would say, the health prevention world. Now apply this to HR. How was this applied to HR? There are companies who have the luxury, because it's not always possible, to do bundle hiring, meaning that they hire multiple people at the same time. So what they one of the findings, and Iris Bonet from Harvard, who has a fantastic book that I recommend, called What Works, which for me is one of the best titles in order to entice people to read the book. But some of the work that was done on bundle hiring was, if you hire a bunch of people at the same time for roles, you put their CVs and their pictures on the table all together. And suddenly, it might strike you that there are only white male that you're hiring. And people would be visually, struck by that.
Yes.
If you do it every week or a month after month, it will be less striking that there is a lack of diversity. Here I'm talking about gender and ethnical origin diversity, but it's the same thing for cognitive or experience diversity. So the fact that you can be exposed visually to the fact that some patterns are very similar or very diverse is a behavioral insight that, or a behavioral tactic that can be used from food to HR and to many other sectors. And as you can see, it's not applying things per se as they are. It's just being inspired by what is happening in one sector and adapting it to another sector. No one size fits all, yet a methodology that you can transfer. And I've been doing this my entire life, being inspired by the work of others, by the work I've done in the past, to create new interventions to help companies in safety and health prevention, in the food industry, we can talk about many examples. But I think the key is to understand the mechanisms, to understand the methodology, and to forget all these hopes of one size fits all silver bullets, and work on having a rigorous method that is flexible enough to include other insights, other parameters, and to tailor it. I insist on this idea of being tailored, from prêt-à-porter to sur mesure to haute couture, if I would use the French words.
Yes. And Charlotte, so back to you again, just the examples that you were inspired to actually go out and try out, in being influenced by some of your, again, favorite behavioral design principles. If you could give us just a few examples from what you've tried out. And you specifically, when we talked about it, prepping for this webinar, talked about experimenting. You said, well, we are experimenting with it. We don't have the final results yet. We are still trying this out, and you're gathering information, and you empathized with me that please say that out loud, that we're not completely done. And I think that was just a beautiful example of what you two just mentioned, that it's never an end sum game. There's always something to learn, and even if you have the result today, you might refine how you would like to do it tomorrow, because it might be a different context. But Charlotte, over to you. What are your some of your examples?
So actually I've also been on a journey. So what I will share at first is my very first step. So when you have taken this masterclass in behavioral design, it's like every other new knowledge that you have gained, how to actually convert it to a practical level when you are back in your job. And for me, some of these principles I used, for instance, path of least resistance and personal relations, because I had to make some data collection. This, you can say, has nothing to do with health and safety. This is applicable to all kinds of situations where you need this in. So I had some data collections, and my first mistake was I was pooling my email to everyone. So I was writing to everyone, I need this information. Could each of you please respond? And I got almost zero response. Then I had to use time to actually kind of following up, right? Writing them again. I really need these data and so on, until I remembered that these personal relations and making it easy is very important. So I actually took the time to write an email copy paste for each of them, making a scheme where they could just put the data in. They didn't have to write anything. They just have to write the numbers in the scheme, replying. And it took me maybe a bit more than 10 minutes to do so. But then I got 100% response.
Oh.
So I got a really good data pool, and I got the response I needed, and didn't have to use time following up, writing them again. So you could say the effort in the beginning was paid off at the end. And I think making it easy for people, because they got a lot of emails all the time. So having to consider what should I respond and when to respond. When I do this on a personal level, writing dear and the person's name, and then just say, please reply, putting your numbers in this scheme, then it was much easier for them to do it right away.
So it sounds like you actually had to put a little bit
experience.
Yeah, it sounded like you had to put a little bit more effort and maybe also time into it in the beginning. And to some, that could sound counterproductive or whatever, that this is supposed to be easy and it's not easy for you to write personal to everyone. So how do you then translate that into then, saving maybe time and money in the long run?
I just need to understand that question.
Is that even possible? So it's kind of like a little bit of a paradox, right? We spend more time.
I think it is because I started out experience that I had to put a lot of time in following up in order to just get some data.
Yes.
So I had a bad data pool, and I used a lot of time writing emails again and again, maybe a bit more annoying every time. So doing the other thing was, this is actually working.
Yeah.
So I think it's like Olivier said, you have to experiment, find out what works and what doesn't work, and then you can sometimes apply. So I have used this method in other contexts because I see it works. Rather than finding out something new ways of doing it. So sometimes you can actually apply the experience you have, and other times you have to think of the context and then maybe design something else.
Yes, I think it's so interesting because there are some paradoxes in this intervention, and I think this is maybe the first webinar where I really struggled with some of these paradoxical interventions from this methodology. Kind of, if you want to change more, change less, and habits rather than motivation will bring you to the goal. And also, if you want big change, start with the small changes. So it's kind of like a little bit counter. And maybe Olivier, could you tell us a little bit about why are we created this way? I mean, it's not necessarily helpful to us human beings when we are hungry, when we're tired, when we're exhausted. We don't necessarily do what's best for us. And also, like, if we want to change stuff, we need to do something that might sound a little counterintuitive from the beginning. Why is it that we human beings are wired this way if it's not good for us in the long run?
I don't know whether it's wired for us. I mean, if we're wired this way or not. The one thing that is for sure is that being informed is not necessary.
Okay.
Or sufficient. Sorry, it's not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. Having the knowledge about what's good and what's not good for us is not a highway to successful behavior change. I got 2 words for you to prove that.
Mm-hmm.
Physicians smoke. Who better than a physician is informed of the downsides and the danger of smoking? Yet you have the most informed people in the world when it comes to health, physicians that smoke. And in some countries, the ratio of smokers amongst physicians is higher than the ratio of smokers amongst the general population. Some people would have a shortcut and say, well, the more you know, the less you act. No. It's different. The issue here is not so much why we're behaving this way, but how can we help and what is the frame of reference? Because generally, it's with our external eye that we say, wow, it's not good to smoke. Why are you smoking? Then that person would argue, maybe in a totally wrong perception from that person, but you know what? When I smoke, I'm less stressed. When I'm less stressed, I can do my job. So it's a trade-off between what is good for the person in the moment. And again, it's just a perception. I'm not at all advocating for smoking. I'm just
Yep.
telling about people's perception. The perception becoming reality. Some
Mm.
people are convinced that if they smoke, they are less stressed. And if they are less stressed, they are more effective at their work. And being more effective in the workplace is more important than the long-term consequences, negative consequences of smoking, even if they are aware of them. That's true. It's a matter of timing. It's a matter of time scale. And as Charlotte mentioned in the example, it's also the fact that when you want to engage people, you need to give them something. One of the reasons Charlotte's second attempt worked better is what you mentioned earlier, reciprocity. People, when you see this little personalized note, see that you put an effort in it. So it's harder to refuse an effort if you see that someone has given you something. It's give and take.
Yeah.
Again, it's not a silver bullet, but you increase your chances to succeed if you give people something.
Yeah.
Same thing with smoking and anything that could be better for yourself, for your health. You need to see some immediate benefit. Hence, your slide on small goals, because
Yes.
small goals are achievable. And I'm happy to share later some examples where we manipulated the goals so that they evolved with people's behavior to make sure that people always see the light at the end of a tunnel, some hope.
Yes, great. Let's get back to that in a minute. But Charlotte, I would like to ask you, because I know that one thing you actually learned from both your course in behavioral design, but also in terms of experimenting with different behavior change in Novo Nordisk, was to establish a network of like-minded people who had the intention to try to use some of these methodologies, yet knowing that it could be hard. So you needed a network. Can you tell us a little bit more about why did you establish this network and how is that working for you in your organization?
Yes, I felt a bit on my own trying to do these experiments, and suddenly I also realized that a lot of my colleagues in Novo Nordisk has the same passion and took the same or similar master classes in behavioral design. So I asked people if they would like to join me in this network, and there are a lot of passion in actually trying to make things easier for our colleagues in different ways. So, and again, we are in the beginning, so it's on very practical levels that we are doing these cases, you can say.
Yes.
So, for instance, during Corona, we could not, in one of the sites, they had to figure out that they could not share their codes anymore. And then I just love the idea that how can we make it easy for people when this is what they're used to do? This is just simply the way they do their work. We have to change that routine. And they had a lot of ideas, and the most simple was basically removing the rack code, the code rack. So it's simply not possible to put up the code anymore where you used to, and thereby share the codes. So I think there are so many good, easy, just do it examples. But again, it's time consuming to actually find the right cases and make it easy to do the right thing.
Yeah, so it sounds so simple when you tell it, right? And then when you found the solution was just to remove the rack, then that sounds so simple. But finding that solution is also what you do in the network. You come up with a problem, you have this problem, and then you help each other come up with ideas, and then you test and try out things you can do to actually solve that problem, to keep the health and safety better in the whole organization. Yeah.
Yes, and as Olivier said, it's about trying to look at others' cases and the experiments and think what can I use? Is this applicable to some of the things and challenges I have?
Yes. And Olivier, I promise to come back to the word manipulative, because is that to manipulate people? What's your take on that? And why is it that we also have a little bit of resistance to that word manipulation in the first place?
Well, from a historical point of view, and I know history does not always apply to nowadays, manipulation was not so negative. It was the art of taking one's opinion to somewhere else and to convince. It's a form of convincing people. Of course, now being manipulated means that someone is making you adopt a behavior or an idea that you were not supposed to, or you even didn't want to adopt.
Mm.
And that is negative. The idea with nudging and behavioral intervention is they have to be transparent. It's for the good of people. It should benefit individually and hopefully the collectivity when you're designing behavioral interventions. Not always easy, because if one thinks of it, creating the right behavioral interventions to help people is like pulling a rabbit out of a transparent hat and explaining the trick to the audience if you were a magician, which is a bit difficult. Yet, it has to stay within the realm of being legal, being ethical, being morally acceptable, and benefiting people. And I think those 4 points are key. And we can be inspired by medicine with that. Yeah. Primum non nocere. First, not harm. And it's sounds obvious. And I think that there might be a lot of people who are listening to us today who might be thinking, wow, those guys are just explaining to us obvious things. Personalize your emails or visualize your plan. But you know what? One of the first things we dismiss as humans and our brains are dismissing is what we consider obvious. Revisiting the obvious is one of the worst and hardest things to do, because what we consider obvious, we consider granted. And if it's granted, why pay attention? And that is kind of the automatic behavior we have. Hence, the necessity to look at what others are doing. A support network where people exchange good practice, the same way you would exchange a technique at a sports club or with a team, is fantastic.
Yes.
And highly recommend that. The power of a collective brain in order to help inspire people, to help deliver, to share mistakes. Because the good thing about experimenting is the fact we are failing. Failure is an option, a very strong possibility, but you don't put it under the rug. You share, failures. If you share failures, you make progresses. And I think that's the whole point of experimenting. Otherwise, you don't need to experiment because you already have the answer.
Yeah, true. And so we're back to a little bit, I'm going to pull this out, which is just your Charlotte were your favorite ones, but if you take some inspiration from a lot of different theoretical inputs for the behavioral design principles, it's exactly what you're just talking about: making it easy, making it obvious, making it fun, all the things you would like to see happen, make it satisfying, make it personal, make it social, and make it happening often. Whereas if you don't want to see a certain behavior, then you should make that behavior, that thing difficult to do, invisible, hide it, make it unattractive, unsatisfying, make it general so that it doesn't fit the person in mind, make it individual and rare, not happening very often. So Charlotte, I know you also experimented with something to hinder people go through the door without, was it the disinfection of the hands or something? And you tried different pictures out to see what was the most beneficial. And what did you learn there from that experiment?
So we actually had two cases. So one was also during Corona, we had to make everybody use the sanitizer, hand sanitizers. And one of my colleagues was actually experimenting where to put this in order to get most people to actually use it. And again, it seems so simple when you find the solution, but there are many ways to do this and where to put it. And basically, when they enter the factory in the morning, before they have actually even changed clothes or anything, just enter the door. There you put it, and you put it in a way where they had to actually go around the sanitizers. So it's very difficult not to see it and not to use it, because it's so obvious that it's right there. And of course, you want to use it, and then you just move on, and then you have already done a good job.
Yeah, so it's a very, again, very concrete, very simple. Now when you see it, it sounds so logical. Olivier, you were talking about something where you help people see the light at the end of the tunnel, getting to a certain point where they really wanted to engage in a certain behavior. Can you tell us a little bit more about that exact experiment?
Yes, and the findings can be transferred to two other domains. I'm going to start again with food behavior. A long time ago, we had the belief that if we would engage with professional athletes, I come from Marseille, and in Marseille, we had a golden generation of swimmers that ended up being Olympic champs, swimmers who looked like gods, honestly. And we thought that these very generous people, looking like God and having the hearts of gods, were volunteering to help us. And we would say that we would take people who were obese and who would be coached by the Olympic athletes as a motivator, etc. We couldn't have been more wrong. Why? Because the goal, the visual goal that these people represented, the athletes, was too far from what the people who were obese were experiencing. And they say, plus being Olympians and champions become also an excuse. Oh, they are champions. We cannot be like them. They are champions and they have strong will, etc. So what we did is we hired coaches that were a little bit chubby. It's very politically incorrect to say that, but whose body type was not as far as the people with obesity. And basically, some of the people who were our target population were losing weight at the same time as the coaches were losing weight, so that the gap between them, who was achievable, remained kind of constant. And we had far better results. And where did the light come from? It came from studies with kids, where generally when some kids have bad grades at school, the parents want the kids to hang out with the best students. They go with a group of best students. But the best students who have high grades, the best marks compared to the kids who are struggling, the goals are almost impossible to achieve. And kids give up.
Yeah.
And the last bit where you can see these kind of issues is in management, in team building. The idea that you're going to hire this person who is a top gun, the best in her field, to join a team, so that he or she would inspire, would lead the team up. It can happen, but it also can discourage people, because generally people see a gap that is too wide between this kind of rock star and who they think they are, and they will self-censor their ideas instead of being motivated or challenging and benefiting from the person that was introduced as a rock star, which might not be the case. But again, in all these examples, we're talking about what people perceive they are, be it true or not, and what the goal that is set for them or by and for them is. And you need to have it needs to be a perception that it's achievable. If a perception is that it cannot be achieved, whether we're talking about food behavior, about learning, about workplace performance, then you're more likely to fail.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for sharing that. I think I want to also pull something into the discussion here that might seem a little unrelated maybe to organizations, but I know that both of you have also had some pretty impressive careers outside being a scientist and being working with Novo Nordisk. Olivier, can I share just one thing about you? You actually also DJing. And you have founded this organization called DJing for Good. And I'm just curious to hear, Olivier, what's going on there? You know, why are you all of a sudden showing up when you Google your name as a DJ? And is there anything we can learn about behavioral design when looking at your gig within DJing?
I don't see the difference. It's changing people's behavior from non-dancing to dancing. But all right, in a few words, I've always been fascinated by being able to help people understand them and influence them to do something that I think is good for them. So it can be in the workplace, but it can be on a dance floor. And DJs for Good is the organization that basically is supporting charities and social impact projects thanks to my DJ set. But back to the DJing, there is one thing that is absolutely common between what I'm doing as a scientist, as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, a coach in a company to help them achieve goals. And the dance floor is this notion of rhythm, this notion of being able to time things, to time intervention. A DJ set must be an emotional roller coaster. It's not about spending 2 hours at the same beat. If you do that, people are going to, at some point you're losing the crowd. But if you go up and down, and if you've got harmonies that are positive or more melancholic, etc., they go through this journey. And behavioral interventions are like that.
Okay,
there was something that you showed that finally I disagreed with. It's the fact that rarity, scarcity was presented as something that is quite negative. I think it can be good. It can be good because if some things are too repetitive, you get used to them and you stop noticing them. Okay. I think that the way behavioral intervention should be designed has to do with incentives. And it's not, I think, everyone agrees on that. You need to find the right incentives. Yet, what is an incentive? There is an element of surprise, of scarcity that helps. Let's say that I want to please my partner, and my partner, he or she, loves chocolate. All right? So if I offer chocolate every day for the first 3 weeks of our relation, it's going to be very pleasant the first days, but then the partner is going to expect chocolates. And after 2 weeks, we'll be tired of chocolates. Now, if I offer chocolates on Valentine's Day, it's nice, or on birthdays, or on Easter, it's nice, but it's expected. The real game, the real successful way to design and to time for when your incentives should be given is when people don't always expect them. They should be kind of expected in a way that if you do something good, you expect to have a reward. So you're incentivized. However, the little element of surprise, meaning if you offer chocolates not on special dates, not on a regular basis, you're more likely to succeed. And I think if people should remember one thing of what I say today, think about the chocolates and when to give others chocolate.
Yeah, and I think also if we are to transfer some knowledge here to leadership, it's also about when to give praise and when to help people learn from their mistakes, and whether you call it out every time people fail, that this is a learning opportunity, and you kind of start that habit of doing that. So let's talk a little bit more about habits. And maybe Charlotte, I know you also have a sidekick. Actually, you won. I Googled you as well, and you won the gold medal within hip hop twice in the last couple of years, and also silver twice in the World Championship. What is that all about? Tell us a little bit about that, and also what does behavioral design have to do with that?
Well, Olivier plays the music. I dance on the dance floor to it. So, well, you can. If you look at this, this is my passion, right? To dance, and I've been doing that for many years. And I think it's fun to actually be able to do this on a competition level when in my age. So this is the senior category, just to say. I'm not competing against the young, very good ones. But looking into behavior, actually, I think there's a lot of principles here coming into action because I'm committed. So I'm actually part of this crew, and I have to show up every time, otherwise it doesn't work. So commitment is also, I think, within behavioral design, something when you're actually say it out loud or commit yourself to something together with others, you are more you have a higher tendency to succeed. And also, I think this is, I'm also a part of a social. So you put that in the other slide that you showed.
Mm.
That we all want to be part of the group. We don't want to be excluded. So it's fun for me to be part of the group.
Yes.
So,
And
so you could say, even though I haven't thought about it in a behavioral design way, there are some principles that is actually working for me here as well.
yeah, but I think I'm curious to hear a little bit about, the habits part. That's repetition, doing it over and over again, and maybe using the habits to actually create that career, and getting back to the whole question about how do you motivate yourself when you are not motivated, right? How do you get yourself back into the game, is maybe by removing some obstacles, that and planning for those days where you're not motivated by having the habits. But then again, Olivier, you just mentioned also having the surprises. So can you talk a little bit about, in an organizational setting, if you were to set up some rules or some things we could be inspired by in terms of how to motivate people to change or to act in a different, in a specific way? How should you go about it in terms of habits and in terms of surprises?
Habits. Again, I'm going to go with something very obvious, but if you make a habit to reward people who go the extra mile, or people who do the job, etc., people know that whatever they're doing, their engagement will be rewarded. So there is an incentive. But it can't be just a matter of when there is this peak activity, when earnings are around the corner, when we solve a crisis and you're rewarded. There also need to be the element of surprise. So it's a combination of habits and surprise. The habit is also part of creating a culture of fairness, a culture of acknowledging people engagement. It might not be just based on performance, but the fact that some people are key to an organization, even if they're not in charge of delivering the final product. But without them being the social glue, the connector, catalyst of a team, the team does not deliver as well. So this, as part of company culture, and I think this needs to be ingrained in company culture, yet rewards and incentives should not be perceived only as transactional. It's not patting your dog because the dog just does something good. No, it's being able to acknowledge with a little bit of element of surprise the work of people, especially the non-tangible work. Because
Okay.
if you're in charge of a team and you need to deliver your report on time for earnings, once it's done, some managers would say, hey, this is your job. Yeah, you just did your job. No, you never just do your job. You do your job, you put your heart in it, then you need to have some consideration, some feedback, some positive feedback. Yet, the manager is not the only person. And as much as the manager could, acknowledge the work of a team, it's also good to highlight some of the soft skills that are not so soft, that are not so, that are underrated. And I think that's the element of surprise. Reward the intangible, acknowledge the intangible, the less obvious. Performance is one thing. Everything else matters for performance to happen. And this we learn from professional athletes as well. We know how easy it is to destabilize a professional athlete with environmental problems.
Yeah.
Their mechanics, their biomechanics, everything is ready, the biology is ready. And then there's this little thing that is happening in their life that could, prevent them from winning. It's exactly the same with a team, the intangible. And that makes it super hard. Just there is someone who said, how could we implement this in our organization in the chat? Might be to integrate this in large companies. Well, hire Pernille, hire Charlotte, and or hire me. That would be the cheeky answer. But
Yeah. But Charlotte, what would be your
Charlotte
answer
is the
to
person who can answer. She's in a large company.
Yes.
But for me, it has been a journey. So, I mean, I took very small steps, experiencing on my own. Then I took the next level, making this network to share experience. And now I've been even more courage. So now we have actually created a course for the Health and Safety Organization based on behavioral design. So now we're trying to actually, with a very simple methodology, some like Olivier said earlier, it needs to be simple. So they have to actually find out what behavior do they want, what frictions do they see, and what kind of behavioral design solutions can they bring into place. So now we are trying to boost this within the organization and try, and the focus is how to actually mobilize other colleagues, how to create this awareness about health and safety, and make it easy for them to join.
Yes.
So
And
my
for success.
suggestion is small steps and figure out what works.
yeah, and there's another user saying, LinkedIn user watching this right now, who said, I've had success with first doing a pilot for change. Once people see that it works, change is more likely to be accepted. Was that also, Olivier, what you just saw and wanted to comment on?
I think an advice to everyone: do not go in your organization, big, small, by saying, "Oh, there's this thing. I read a book. I attended a seminar." As great as the seminar or the webinar is, don't go and say we're going to do behavioral things, etc. No, the one thing that convinces people is what works. Again, this is Bonnet's title. If you show things that work, you can call it the way you want afterwards. People will engage more. Success calls for more success. If you show that you can be successful, you will more likely have a budget to do more intervention. And Charlotte's example is great. Go step by step, be patient, be meticulous, have a rigorous method. But just don't think that because you're going to wave a flag of a new buzzword, or even if it's not a buzzword, it's something that is concretely anchored in science and rigorous method, is not enough. Informing people in that case too is not enough. The proof is in the pudding. So cook.
So it's about seeing it, making it visible again. So I actually wanted you to maybe just as a last comment from both of you, what is one concrete thing participants of today's webinar can do tomorrow already to apply some of the learnings from this webinar and behavioral design principles in the organization? You almost already answered it, Olivier. Do you have anything else to add to this question?
You don't DJ in a great club by knocking at the door and saying, "Hey, I'm a great DJ." The first thing you need to do is to do a mixtape, give a mixtape, and then you might have a chance. So, ladies and gentlemen, create your mixtapes and make them listen to your manager, your boss, or your employees. That's my advice.
Nice. Charlotte, what about you?
Small steps, try it out, what works, what doesn't work. And when people see what works and you experience it yourself, it's much easier to take the next step. So I would say start in the low, ambitious level, just small steps, and then move on from there.
Yeah.
I used to say to the people I try to get interested in this, if you do the same you are used to, you get the same result, right? So if you want to change things and do something different, do something different.
Yeah. So thank you to both of you for enlightening us on these principles today, but also just talking from your experience of applying these principles in organizational settings and beyond. And I know you both have so many more concrete examples you would love to share. So we'll follow up on that one in our different writings coming from session at the LinkedIn page we have there. So please follow us on LinkedIn. And also share the webinar if you want others to watch it. We will share the recording on our website tomorrow already, so you can go ahead and share it there. And thank you to everyone who listened in. It's been a pleasure. I know that there were more questions and we couldn't find time to cover all of them. But again, we'll come back to you later and comment on them in our writings. Thank you, Olivier. Thank you, Charlotte. And have a great day out there, everybody.
Thanks a lot for your time.
by my side. Maybe this ride could make things right. Speeding on, blurring out the lights. Soon your eyes will be the only blue. Give me more minutes of this peace. We could go anywhere. This is our chance to